On this week's episode, I'm excited to bring on Dai Manuel as a guest. Dai is an award-winning digital thought leader, author, distinguished Toastmaster, TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, former chief operating officer of a multi-million-dollar retail company, and a sought-after lifestyle mentor executive performance coach. Dai knows the struggle of the juggle and keeping his health and happiness a priority. He models his work based on the 5 F's: fitness, family, faith, finances, and of course, fun. Introducing lifestyle mentor, Dai Manuel. Welcome to the show, everyone. On today's episode, I'm excited to have with me Dai Manuel. Dai, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vijay. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It feels like this has been a long time coming. I think I rescheduled with you, like, I swear, 3-4 times. And I just got to say, you are so gracious. Thank you for your understanding, too, by the way. It's awesome.
Of course.
It's meant to be today. You know, that's it.
It's meant to be. I was actually waiting for a reschedule. I'm like, it's going to happen.
Dude, I was, no joke. I told myself, well, actually, I was talking to my wife last night. I'm like, I'm not missing this tomorrow. I don't care. Whatever happens in your guys' lives tomorrow, you're without me. Okay. So I'll see you after work tomorrow. You know, like I was like, I am not missing it again. So, but thank you. Thank you so much for your graciousness and just your understanding. You know, you're a super chill dude, and I love it, Vijay.
I really appreciate it, man. I mean, honestly, this is a perfect segue into what you do. You are a lifestyle mentor. Tell me more about that. I love your energy. I love everything you're about. But let's hear about what you do.
Oh, thanks, Vijay. Yeah, well, listen, you know, we're all trying to figure out ways to make an impact in the world, right? And it all starts at family level and then community level, and maybe it expands out beyond that. I've worked in lots of different capacities in my lifetime. You know, I'll date myself right now. I'm 45, but I'm staring down the barrel at 46 about a month from now. It's actually a month today. I'll be 46. So,
well, happy birthday.
Thank you. It's, but with that, you know, as you can imagine, that's a lot of time on this planet. And in that time, I've run through a lot of stuff. And I've had a lot of really unique experiences. I mean, I say they're unique to me because that's really how it always works out. But I've made some pretty big pivots. Pardon the cliche. I know with COVID, that's been a term that's been played to death. But I've certainly made some big changes, especially in the last 13 years. And my focus has really been on how do I contribute? You know, like one of my goals is on at the end of my life, hopefully when I'm like 130, I'll be laying in bed and my family's going to be around me. All the people I care about will be looking at each other, and I'm going to say to them, you know, before I head off this mortal coil, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm leaving this place better than it was when I got here. Peace out. You know, like that is ultimately the easiest way to surmise what it is I do. I just try to help people with navigating change, but do it in a fun way that creates the results that we're all looking to create both personally and professionally and everything in between. So you can call me a life coach. You can call me a mentor. I'm more of a mentor than a coach because I tend to support people in areas that I myself have had a lot of struggles in, whether that be with addiction with alcohol and narcotics, living with a chronic autoimmune disease. I was morbidly obese as a teenager. You know, I've had some pretty bad stumbling moments in my life, and you know, I don't regret them. I've learned how to learn from them and to move forward so I can actually help others navigate that too. So in that capacity, more of a mentor than a coach, but hey, you know, that's just what I do.
That's incredible. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm looking at you on video. You look very fit. So I want to go back to the morbidly obese conversation we just had. Tell me more about how it was growing up and how you decided to switch your mindset or get to where you are right now.
Well, to be blunt, it's still a work in progress. Okay. It's like, you know, as much as I think, oh, I'm finally there, I'm there. And I realize as soon as you get to whatever there is, it's like, oh, now I got to go over there, you know? So it's like this ongoing journey, but my journey to health, to well-being was anything but a straight line. You know, my parents separated, ultimately divorced in around the age of 10, when I was 10. And again, I dated myself already. So let's do the math, everybody. We're going to go back 35 years. Okay. So 35 years ago, marital statistics weren't, or I should say, aren't what they were today as what they were then. And what I mean by that is, I mean, there's more statistics around, you know, marriage is not lasting. You know, over 50% of marriages nowadays end in divorce. And back then, I mean, there was one other person in my class that had parents that weren't together still. So, when it came to support materials, it came to just getting support, having a conversation, really, there was a lot of stigma around that. And at age 10, I didn't know how to navigate it. I had no idea. And to be fair, my parents, they didn't really have a clue either. They were so focused on their own professional endeavors. And my dad was building his business, and he worked a lot. My mom was leveling up her education again so she can move and advance her career path. And so it left me and my brother there with a fair bit of free time, being in between. And as such, I was looking for ways to navigate some of the emotional duress I was under. And I found something to help me with that. And that's where the problem began, because I learned that by watching certain movies, playing video games, and especially eating certain types of foods, I got this emotional release immediately. Now, it only lasted in the moment, and then eventually it fades. And so you end up on this sort of a cycle where you're constantly self-medicating. And for me, it was eating food. And it wasn't like I wasn't getting enough. It was actually, I was eating a lot of food, but it was very nutrient poor, calorie rich. Listen, none of us have to be a nutritional scientist to figure out that if I keep eating more calories than I need and I don't move my body, well, after those 5 years, by the time I got to age 14, almost 15, I'm at the doctor's office with my mom. Dr. Grant's pulling my mom into the office, and he's like, Benny Ann, Dai's morbidly obese. At 15, I'm like, what the hell's morbidly? And what is obese? Like, I had no clue, but it didn't sound like a good thing to have those two side-by-side words, especially when in reference to who I am. And that was a tough moment, because it changed the dynamics in my household. And my parents obviously saw the depression, saw my anxiety. They saw me sort of spiraling out of control, becoming very introverted. And as parents, all we want are our kids to be happy. I mean, really, you ask any parent, what do you want for your children? I want them to be happy. Like, that's it. That's what we want. As a father of 2 teenage girls, I'll tell you, that's what I want. And every time they came to me to offer help, Vijay, and I don't know if you can relate to this at certain periods in your own life, the people that are closest to us, of course, they want to help us. They love us unconditionally. But when you're not in a place to help yourself, anybody extending a hand in help seems like a hand coming at you in attack. And that's what I was navigating. I acted out. I was very, let's just say I was troubled. Okay. I was troubled. And at age 15, I came one day to this realization that it had taken me 5 years to get to that place of unhealth. And if I was honest with myself, thinking about what 20 may look like, for at age 15, thinking, okay, when I'm 20, what am I going to be? Where am I going to be? What will I be doing? What kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Like, these are just questions I had, and I was thinking, and I started to realize, it took me 5 years to get to this place of unhealth. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I know it won't be better 5 years from now than it is right now. And that's scary. It's really scary. And out of that fear, I came to a place where I decided to make some changes. I was more afraid of literally not changing than I was of the idea of changing. And if you think about any time we've navigated big change in our lives, that's usually what happens, right? We're like more afraid of the idea of not changing than change. And that's usually when we know we're ready to make some changes. And so I did. I had to educate myself. I had to learn how to eat properly, to flourish and to thrive, not just simply survive. And on top of that, I had to learn how to move my body to make me feel good. And to change some of my physicality, if you will. And so that set in motion a 2-year journey to release the weight and ultimately develop a new lifestyle, and along with that, a new mindset. But it was 2 years, and it was hard. Okay, it was hard. I'll just tell you straight up.
Do you think that people need to get to that difficult place to make that change, or do you think it's possible to make that radical 180 switch before hitting it?
I think it depends on our relationship with change, period. Like, we have certain relationship to that word or that understanding or what comes with it. And if we think back to any significant changes any of us have navigated, rarely is change super easy. It's not like something that we say, hey, that was good. Oh, I'd like to do that again. I mean, like, we don't really do that, right? We're kind of in this confrontational place where it's like, I want to make some changes, but I also not sure how I'm going to do it. And it might take a lot of work, and it's not going to feel comfortable. So I think more often than not, it comes from a place of fear. So it's like we're running away from a potential future, running towards a new way that we want to show up. But it was fear. And I think about every major change I've made in my life, there's been an element of fear there. And I know fear is sometimes coined or seen as a negative, but let's be honest, it's a survival mechanism, okay? Like, it's there to preserve us, to keep us going, to make us more alert and present and aware of the moment. And it doesn't have to be something for lack of a better way of describing it, that we're intimidated by. We can learn from that and lean into it and really try to look at it more from a logistical let me just say it this way. Change is rarely easy, but it's almost always worth it. And I think that's what we have to remember. However you get to that place of ready to make a change, it doesn't matter, you're there. Capitalize on it, and I think that's the biggest thing. It's that immediate decisive action that we take, that first one that we take, that first step, if you will, that really sets everything else in motion. But what's most critical to happen within the first few weeks of making these big changes is you have to experience some wins. You have to see the results be manifested by your actions, because if you don't, let's be honest, it's easy to give up. It's easy for that part of our brain to say, yeah, told you so. The subconscious, that unconditional bias that sometimes we're faced with, internally. It's like, I already think I'm going to fail. I failed many times on different diets. Who am I kidding? I'm probably just going to fail again at this. And then, a few weeks in, I'm not seeing the results I wanted. See, I told you, I was right. I can't do this. I'm a failure. I'm meant to be this way. And I'm using this as an example because, believe me, those are the inner voices that I had to contend with every single day. And that's what I meant by the mindset shift, and that took a couple of years. And even then, why I said it's a work in progress, I still have moments where I look in the mirror and I remind myself of the morbidly obese teenager looking at me. I'd reflect back on that because some of those emotional scars, they're still there, man. Like I always say, kids can be mean, but teenagers, they can be cruel. And some of the ridicule and the teasing and bullying that I had to endure during my state of unhealth, like, I don't wish that upon anyone. And I think that's also a big driving factor for me today, especially how I try to help people, because I don't want people to feel that way.
Yeah, you focus a lot of your work on nutrition and fitness and health, basically. So, what are some things that you learned back when you're in your teenage years, making this transition into a healthier lifestyle that you think can resonate with the audience, or something that actionable advice that the audience can use?
Well, I think the one piece, and thanks for asking the question, Vijay. It's we've often heard about this idea of trying to find things that we enjoy doing, especially when it comes to fitness. And there's a lot of truth to that, like we are more likely to continue doing things that we enjoy, right? Like if you don't enjoy the action or the activity that you've now identified as what's going to help you reclaim your health, you can convince yourself to keep going quite a bit in the early days, but that will wane. And it wanes, sometimes very quickly, because it's not our default way of looking at things. It's not our new normal yet. And so we're constantly trying to convince ourselves or negotiate with ourselves to do the thing. And I'm always about trying to make that a null point, when it comes to negotiating. It should be a non-negotiable. Like your health should be a non-negotiable, in theory. And I think we all would agree with that. It's pretty hard to build any sort of life without a foundation of health first. And I'm talking healthy mind, healthy body, healthy soul, even financial health. Like there's a lot of factors that come in. I'm not just referring to health from a physical or mental state. It's everything, and if there's areas that we feel unhealthy in, it's determining what is something that I know I can do. I can implement it into my already existing lifestyle. I don't have to reinvent myself, because a lot of people do that. They try to do a 180, but there's other aspects of their life that can't do a 180. And yet you think that by this new lifestyle, this new commitment to health and making these massive drastic changes, that everything else is going to change automatically. And that's not usually the case. We often encounter friction in those moments. And that friction is another reason why we give up at times. So 1, find something that you love to do. 2, start doing it. Don't worry about how much time you commit to doing it. Just make a commitment to do it and then celebrate when you've done it. As I always like to tell my clients, like I know Nike, pretty famous company. I would say that it's a pretty well-branded entity in the planet. Their slogan, what is it, Vijay?
Just do it.
Just do it. Great slogan. Love it. But you know what? The slogan's better. I just did it. Like
Ooh, I like that one.
That is way better. Now I don't know if it's as marketable, but for me and my clients, I'm like, I want to celebrate the completion of the action, because that's where all the results start to happen. That's where the change happens. Without the action, it's just a bunch of theory. And there's a bunch of us, sometimes I had one client say, well, I feel like I'm just masturbating mentally, and I'm like, okay, well, stop that and just start doing, right? Like, but that's the conundrum. That's the challenge, is going from the idea of wanting to commit to doing something and then the actual doing something. And that is the gap I'm always trying to shrink for people. And I wish there was just an easy do this and no problem. That chasm is now easily crossable, but it's not always so simple.
So a lot of people know that health is extremely important. Like you mentioned, there's physical health, mental health, financial health. A lot of people in theory, like you said, understand it is important, but a lot of people don't actually take action exactly like we're talking about. So what is something you do with your clients that can get them the results or help people take action?
Ooh, good question. That question around motivation, like what motivates us to do anything really? And there's usually an ego component, right? There's an identity component that we want to massage or realize. And what I mean by that is if we have a vision for who we believe we are or who we want to be, like especially be seen as or received as, if you can be brutally honest with yourself, you have to give yourself a grade, based on this vision of who I want to be, the values that I prioritize. The clearer we are with that picture, I find that it creates confidence for us. Clarity tends to lead to confidence. And when we feel more confident, we tend to take more action and we procrastinate less. So an exercise I invite people to do first is get really clear on what are the non-negotiables in your life. What are the things that you're not willing to ever sacrifice, especially around values. And as just an example, family is one of those things for me. And, not blaming my family for this, but there's been a number of times I've had to reschedule with you, Vijay, because I've had all of a sudden these family, let's just say some challenges. I had an issue with my one daughter and, it's not a big deal, but it was something that required my immediate attention and I prioritized family. So yeah, did I reschedule? Yeah, I did. Did I feel good about rescheduling? Did I feel out of integrity? A little bit, for sure. I'm not someone that likes to make a commitment and not follow through on that. It doesn't sit well with me. But I had to honor one of my values, which is family, and it's non-negotiable. And so this is what I try to invite clients to get clear on, because if you get clear, you feel more confident. When you're confident, you take more action, you procrastinate less, and the action of actually doing also builds more confidence, starts to create the results that you're wanting to see, which in itself creates a whole lot of dopamine. Okay. And dopamine's a good thing. We can use it to help us, right? To help us stay on target, stay motivated, stay moving in the right direction. And so it's playing to our minds and sort of some of those chemicals that get released or churned up when we do certain things for ourselves. And so I like to try to play that into it because, when we do something that's good, something that really aligns with how we see ourselves, we can't help but feel good about that. We feel proud, we feel present, we feel like I got this. And that's the place that we have to get to. So clarity first, get clear on what's a non-negotiable, what's the kind of person that you want to be, what are those values that are most important to you of anything? Because those are often the things that we can use to filter our decisions as well as help guide us more effectively through life, especially the hard stuff. And trust me, we all got hard stuff. We all do. And the more dialed in you are with what I've just talked about, the more resilient you'll be. So on the down days where, and I'll be full disclosure here, I remember back in the day, especially when my depression's been really challenged, where it's really been in a really hard place, and I've struggled with this all my life. So I have no problem talking about it. It's okay. We all have our mental health struggles and challenges, but I'm happy to say, and I'm actually proud to say that, what would normally derail me for 3-4 days, it's like 24 hours now. I bounce back really quickly. And that's the resiliency I'm wanting for everybody. Like, don't think I want to avoid this at all costs, because that's impossible. You're going to have down days. We all do. But what do you do in the down days? How quickly do you come back from the down days? That's the part that we can develop and work on and celebrate. So yeah, those are just a few ideas on that. Hopefully it made sense.
No, absolutely. I love the non-negotiables part. I think a lot of people are not intentional about being aware of their non-negotiables. They just kind of go with the flow. And I've been guilty of this myself, but then I'm realizing as I'm going through life that I need to set stronger principles in what is non-negotiable.
What are for you? I want to actually first, Vijay, what are your non-negotiables? I'm really curious. What are some of them?
Gosh, non-negotiables for me, where I want it to be, because once again, I'm still going through this process. I need to prioritize my health, right? There was a time in 2020, right when the pandemic started, I had the most unhealthy lifestyle, eating pizza rolls and chicken nuggets every day and staying up all night and, literally doing nothing. But then one of my best friends came and stayed with me. He was basically my mentor, and he taught me how to exercise and eat healthy. And so I lost 20 pounds of fat over the next year and a half. And then it was like crazy, right? So I was able to I had to go get my suits retailored because they were too big. And that felt like a huge win, right? And so that's starting to become my non-negotiable, but I did kind of fall off the track last few months, but trying to get right back into it. And that's the main reason why I decided to have you on, because you're big into fitness, big into health. And I think that's something, especially entrepreneurs or people who are doing something with their lives, they oftentimes neglect health in pursuit of money or relationships or pursuing something else rather than health, when that's, I think, the most important thing you have, because without that you have nothing.
Well said, Vijay. Honestly, you're spot on. And I often look at, and I see this a lot with parents, especially, that parenthood and martyrdom, they seem to overlap a lot. But I see this with entrepreneurs as well, because often our businesses are our children and we
Yeah.
treat it as such and we prioritize everything for the business. But the first person that gets cut from that equation is ourselves, right? It's like, oh no, I'll have time for me later. I'll just work on the business right now. It will provide time later. But then, by the time later comes, let's just say it's been years down the road. Well, now you've got years of things to undo, So
Yeah.
why not stay proactive and figure out a way to create some sort of balance? And I know that's in itself kind of a challenging word, because the more you seek balance, often you find you just don't get it. Because as soon as you focus on one thing, your eyes then leave whatever else you were looking at. And so this idea of multitasking, I mean, just there's a great book by Cal Newport called Deep Work.
Yeah. Yep.
Amazing book, right? But
I
he
have it
talks
right up
about
here,
this problem.
actually.
Oh, do you have it? Oh, great. Yeah, it's one of mine
The
too.
yellow one. There
Dude,
you go.
it is a great book, and I recommend it
Yeah.
to everybody, especially if you want to understand more of the psychology of why do we do certain things, but also what is the things that allow us to sustain our doing, our actions, right? Like, what's the best way to be most productive and effective? And in it, he really blows a hole in this whole idea of balance, right? He's like, it's bull. As soon as you turn your focus from one thing to another, well, you can't focus on that other thing anymore. So it's now trying to create the frequency to at least get the minimum effective dose in every area of our lives. But you got to be organized to do that. You do. Like my calendar, I'm a big time blocking fan. There's another exercise I encourage people to do is take charge of your calendar. Forget about time management, because it's just an illusion. It is. Time's intangible. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. You can't manipulate it. But what you can do is you can manage your commitments to how you're going to spend that time. And so I invite people to be more, manage commitments, not manage time. And when you start to look at your calendar, use different colors for different type of things. So all my values, I got family, I've got fitness, I've got faith, finances, as well as the overarching roof of fun. So I like to use my 5 F's to keep things clear. Plus I love alliteration. It's the author in me. But what I do is I have different colors for each of those. And so if I have a commitment for clients, that's obviously going to fall under work. And that would fall under the finance piece. Because it's how I produce, it's also how I contribute, but it's also what provides an illumination for me and my family. So I include that under finances. Anything that is more relationship based, I actually include that under faith. Like time with the family, how I'm making an impact in my passion projects. That's sort of where I classify faith. And I do that because I know as soon as we start talking about secular belief systems, inevitably you get a big chunk of the audience that tune out. So I like to take the religion out of it, but refer to faith more as something that's internal, that aligns us with a lot of some of these other values, especially around family, relationships, contribution. And so there's that piece. Fitness has its own color as well. And just play with this analogy or this idea, this strategy, because at the end of a week, or what my wife and I do every Sunday, is we then look at our week coming. We block out certain commitments that we have to maintain, but then we also fill in some family commitments. We fill in some personal commitments. The neat thing is I can see this in one glimpse. I look at the week on my Google Calendar. I can see all the different colors laid out, and I can see how many blocks I have of each. If I see only one block for my fitness, I know I've got some tweaking to do on my calendar. I need more red, in the calendar that week. Or it's like I use like a light pink for anything that's family based. Well, man, I've only got like 2 little family blocks of time set aside. I got to add more of those in. So this is that way of sort of creating the awareness to create more balance.
I think that's really, really cool that you're able to use a calendar to to visually see where you're dedicating your time towards, intentionally spending your time. Because a lot of times I notice we're just scrolling on Instagram or TikTok and we just hours have passed by, and that's causing a huge mental illness epidemic, right, or pandemic. And it's incredible, just the fact that you're being intentional about where your time goes can help you live a richer life in all senses of that word,
Well,
right? It's
again, work in progress.
yeah, work in progress.
So far, so good. It's but
Yeah.
it's definitely an exercise I invite anybody to try. And I think once you get into the flow of using that, you just feel more confident about how you're investing time,
Yeah.
because time does have an ROI on it, or at least it can. But when you're scrolling on social for 2 or 3 hours a day, what's that return on an investment? And I
Right.
and I would
Very, very
challenge
low.
most people. It's probably quite negative. Actually, it could be
Yeah,
like a
probably
negative
negative. Yeah.
compounding. Like it's not a positive ROI. It's actually a negative ROI, especially when it comes to mental health and connection and clarity for ourselves and what we want. Like there's a lot of distractions out there. There really is.
So speaking of ROIs and negative ROIs, I remember earlier in this conversation you mentioned alcohol,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I want to hear your story with your relationship with alcohol and where you currently are and what you'd like to talk about regarding that subject.
Well, thank you. Alcohol is interesting because I mentioned that I've dealt with social anxiety and just anxiety, period, in my life, and depression, and I've have great days and I have not so great days. That's just life, man. But I've got a lot of tools and resources that help me with those moments when I'm feeling challenged, and it works great as long as I do them. But there was one thing that happened when I went from really using food, movies, and video games as an escape. I realized that there were still some challenges that I had that I thought, by getting fit and healthy, all those things would have got better. I thought my confidence would go up. I thought I'd be more present for other people. I thought I wouldn't be as intimidated around a group setting. There's all these like assumptions I had that, hey, if I'm fit and I'm healthy, all these other things that I feel challenged on will go away. Well, I hate to break it to everybody, it didn't. Okay, it didn't go away, and a lot of those mental health challenges were still there. And what I realized was very early on, around 17 ish, I was introduced to alcohol. And I was like, wow, I have a few of these drinks. Man, I feel like a completely different person. I can be that person that I want to be. I can be that, gregarious, outgoing, life of the party guy. I can talk to a perfect stranger in front of a group of people. And I feel fine. I'm okay with that. It's like, as they say, that liquid courage, right? Or liquid confidence. I had a very positive, result based on drinking. But the problem is you can't do that all the time. There is balance, and especially when it comes to consumption. And I didn't know that, nor, to be honest, did I want that. I found something that worked for me, allowed me to escape, and it became my way of managing stress and depression and overwhelm. It was my escape every day, just like what food was before. So it's really interesting because it's like, gosh, I went from one to another. And at the same time, I met my wife in our early 20s. We started having kids by my mid 20s. We were married young, building a family young. I'm building and scaling one of my first businesses at the time, with a business partner. So there was a lot of factors, a lot of moving parts, which at times I also would justify. I earned this drink. Look at my life. Look at how busy it is. Look at how busy I am. Like I'd wear this badge of honor. People, how are you doing? I'm so busy. Can't you see my badge? And I, there's just all these things. And to be fair, Vijay, I was living in my ego. I was all about chasing success, and my understanding of success was the guy that accumulates the most amount of toys and has the biggest voice, and the guy that's the flashiest. Well, that's obviously the most successful person. Again, I look at my association at the time. I look at who are my mentors and my influences in my life at the time. It doesn't. Yeah, it's not a surprise that those are some of the beliefs that I had, and the way that I dealt with things. And why I'm sharing that is a lot of us have to look at who do we spend the most amount of time with, who drips into us, our mentality, our perspective on our own life, the way we show up in life. Like who's the ones that are influencing us? And Jim Rohn used to always say, we're the net sum of the 5 closest relationships that we maintain. And if we think about that, I have to ask ourselves, is those 5 people actually uplifting me, challenging me to evolve, to be better, to be that person that I said I want to be? Because if they're not, maybe I need to change my association. Now, I didn't come to that conclusion for about 15 years later. So as much as hindsight is 2020, sure wasn't for me. I had to go through all the hard stuff and make it really hard on myself before I could come back to realize that. So hopefully everyone's taking note right now, so you don't have to go through all the crap I went through. But regardless, this sort of set in motion this habit of drinking, my escape, and it by the time I got into my early 30s, I was highly functioning. I got a lot done. Our business had scaled to 8 figures a year. We were doing really well.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was great. It was in the retail space. I had a chain of retail stores, B2B, e-com. The whole gamut in the fitness equipment industry. And did that for 17 years, a long time, big chunk of my adult life. And one day, and to be fair, my wife and I, we were having challenges. We were 10 years into our relationship at this point. My daughters were 6 and 4, so both under the age of 6, technically. And life had just gotten really unruly. But I was the one making it unruly. Like, it was funny because it was really nothing. Anybody on the outside looking in would think, geez, Guy's got it all together. What a beautiful family. Successful business. Everything's great. So that was the impression everybody had of me because it was the impression that I gave. This is before Instagram was Instagram. I was already living a filtered life, okay? Like, it straight up. I'm just being honest here, and I wasn't very good at asking for help. Vulnerability, I always thought was a weakness. Sharing how I was feeling, no, you don't do that, never. So I never had any really close relationships with other men, especially. I always looked at them as being competition or people I couldn't fully trust, because if I shared something that was vulnerable with them, maybe they'll use it against me. Again, this is just how my brain was working. These are some of the beliefs that I was trying to fight against, and one day after I'd been out all night, I don't remember how I got home. I woke up on the floor, literally beside the bed. It was around noon the next day. My wife and family, they were already up and down in the kitchen and doing life. And I crawled up off the floor, wiped the saliva from my face, and made my way down into the kitchen, where my wife was clearly PO'd. Okay, she was not happy. Because this wasn't a one-off occurrence, Vijay. Like, this was a recurring pattern. And most of the time, and this is what would happen, and I hope people can appreciate the transparency I'm sharing right now, because it's not for shock and awe to say, hey, look at me, what I did. Oh man, I screwed up. More so, just I want to invite people to look at themselves. I'm just holding up a mirror here, and just get honest with yourself. These are some of the habits that you have. Now, me as a man who identifies as a man, okay, I would get to that place where it would be, as I call it, an OS moment, oh shit moment, right? Oh boy. And often in those moments, I was very good at telling my wife what she wanted to hear. I won't let that happen again. I'm so sorry. Gosh, I went a little bit too far last night. Don't worry, that will never happen again. I would make these beautiful stories, and I would try to affirm her that, don't worry, this won't happen again. And then, sure enough, I'd be awesome 3-4 weeks, but then I would do it again because I believed that I earned it. I earned a night out. I've been so good. I've been a great dad. I've been a great husband the last week, last 2 weeks. I deserve a night out tonight. And this, again, I was negotiating with myself all the time to justify my actions. Well, this one day, my wife, the tinge of ginge, fiery redhead, she tells it as it is. She doesn't pull punches, and that's what I love about her most. She always, will push on people, but always from a place of love and care. That morning, or noon, I should say, she's looking at me after we're talking about what it's going to be like to live in different places and to co-parent the children, basically talking about divorce. And that's very triggering for me because, as I shared with you before, I already knew that was a path my parents went down. There were certain things I didn't like about that process. I started thinking about my own kids and what divorce could do for them. It was a bit of a spiral. And she asked me a question, Vijay. And this is the question. So those that are listening and watching, this is it. This is the question that changed everything for me 13 years ago. My wife said, Dai, are you being the type of man you would want to marry your daughters? It was like getting punched in the nose and kicked between the legs at the same time. Like, it was just instantaneous. It was like a lightning bolt hit me. I was like, I'm not that guy. In fact, if what I was modeling to my kids is, this is a man, this is a father, this is a brother, this is a husband, this is a son, this is a business owner, a community leader. If they were looking at what I was modeling and that was their impression of what that is, holy smokes, I didn't do a good job as a dad. And it was that moment of clarity. I made a commitment to myself first. I was going to go a year without drinking. But more importantly to that, I sat them down and I told them. I'm going to do a year, no drinking, no. My daughter, my 6-year-old Chardonnay, she's looking up at us and she's like, okay, so no coffee, no pop, like she's like, I'm like, no, adult drinks. Oh, okay. So it was kind of nice because it brought lightness and brevity, sort of, it broke the tension, right, that we were all experiencing at that moment. And we all chuckled, and that's what set in motion a year of no drinking. And from the age of 17, when I had my first drink, I had never done more than a month without drinking. So you can imagine 15, 16 years, I was like 33, 34 at this point. Dude, like that would be the longest stint I'd ever done without drinking. And it was crazy hard because I didn't realize how much I was using alcohol to cope and to escape. It was literally a walking cane for me. It was how I functioned. And you take away the cane, the crutch, if you will, you learn. I got a pretty bad limp here. In fact, I can't walk very well at all. What do I do? And that was a moment where I just, pardon the pun, but I got super sober, really clear that I need some help. And it was the first time in my life I got vulnerable with my wife. We had been married for 10 years. I'd never been vulnerable with her and really shared what was going on inside, because that was what was modeled to me from my own father. Very stoic. He would only express one emotion, and that was when he's pissed off. Anything else, it was just very calm, very collected, just even keel. And that's who he was. He grew up. He used to tell me, like, his parents never said that he was loved. Like, can you imagine that? My dad was born in 44, so, he'd be near 80 now, but, that'd be really hard. But it was common back then. This is common for that generation, the baby boomers, to have lived in this kind of an environment and brought up. And so, he was doing his best. Now, I didn't always feel that way. Now, in hindsight, being someone in their mid-40s, and I'm a little bit older than he was when he divorced my mom, I have a better understanding of what he was going through. And I didn't want to go down that path. So I made that commitment, and then I had to get to work. And it was hard. But man, was it worth it. And we got to the end of that year. And I'm full disclosure, I worked with a psychologist. I worked with a relationships counselor. I got to work to try to figure out what I needed to do to actually truly live authentically as the person I always said that I wanted to be, and the person that I would often show up as. But I wanted that to be the everyday, all day. I wanted to be that guy for my family, for myself, And at the end of that year, my wife sits me down and she's like, wow, you did it. You went a whole year. Do you want to celebrate, share a bottle of wine together? And Vijay, and to be fair, I could have easily said yes. But so much good things had happened in that 12 months. I remember looking at her and saying, you know what, Christy? What if I keep going? What if I just keep doing what I'm doing right now? Keep the alcohol out of it and just keep doing the work I've been doing. What would happen then? I was like, well, let's find out. Anyways, 13 years later, like everything in my life changed. Everything. I ended up exiting out of that business 7 years ago. I wrote a book, I've done a TEDx talk. We traveled the world for 5 years, 2.5 years. We lived in Bali, Indonesia. Like, man, I look at everything that we've done since I said no to alcohol and yes to my life. Everything changed. And I only bring this up because it's amazing. We're all just one decision away from changing our lives. Literally one decision away. But are we asking the right questions to create the right answer? That's the challenge, right? And that's what I'm trying to help people with. So hopefully I gave you a little bit of insight to that whole process,
No, that is incredible. Thank you so much for being vulnerable, especially on a podcast like this. People are listening. I'm sure many of us can relate to that story. And I get it. I absolutely love that story. And it's something that I think can benefit a lot of people, knowing that they've been in the same shoes as you. And then knowing, hey, let's just try it for a year. At the end of the year, it's possible to absolutely just change your life because you're already on a good track record.
Yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway during that year?
Well, that vulnerability is not a weakness. That was really the biggest, truthfully, the realization that I had, because all of a sudden I saw vulnerability not as a weakness, not as something to be avoided, but actually it's a skill. And it's a skill that I can develop. And it's a good one to develop. Now, I always invite people to go watch like some of the TED Talks or watch or listen to or read some of the books by Brene Brown. Like she, in the corporate and the professional side of things when it comes to vulnerability, especially in corporate, man, she's nailed it. She's just, it's amazing. And she also talks on the personal, but she really specializes in more the professional side of things. And I love her teachings, but she has something where she says, vulnerability is not meant for shock and awe. If we're being vulnerable to say, hey, look at me, whether to create sympathy, or try to get something else for ourselves by using that story. Like, vulnerability is not meant to be used that way. It's kind of icky when it's used in that way, you know. But when it's used as a skill to allow us deeper connection and understanding and relatability to one another, that's a good thing. And what I realized in that first year was, as I started to put my hand up or hand out asking for help, there was people on the other side more than willing to hold the hand out and help me. But all I had to do was ask for it. They were already there, ready to go. They loved me unconditionally, you know, and they were just waiting. Because it's hard to offer help to people that don't want to be helped. As I told you, that's how I felt about my parents back in the day when I was obese, right? It's like, hey, Dad, we'll get you a gym membership. We'll get you a dietitian. Do you want to do martial arts? Like, they were always making suggestions of ways to help me. But every time they said that to me, all I heard was, I'm not good enough. You want me to change. I have no value as I am right now. So you want me to change to be of value. Like, that's what was going on in my mind. So of course I felt like an attack, right? And the cliche, you can only help people that want to be helped. It's true. It is true. That's why it's a cliche. And so I learned that being vulnerable is a skill. It brings people closer together. And the neatest thing was, and this is what I've really noticed in the last 5 years, is I've facilitated and co-facilitated men's groups to create spaces that it's safe for men to practice the skill of vulnerability amongst a safe group of people that want to work on that and support each other unconditionally. And in that, I've noticed, Vijay, is that when one man opens up and expresses something that he's being challenged by and he's working through, inevitably around the table, we would use hand gestures rather than talking to show that we relate or we connect with what they're saying. Just a simple hand on the table, as an example, when we're sitting around a table together, that's just a sign that, wow, I get it. I get it. I feel what you're going through. Or we put a hand on the chest or a hand up, like just this little gesture when my man's sharing something that's extremely vulnerable for them for the first time, a little hand gesture from another male to say that I get you, or hey, me too. And it was the me too that I was blown away by. A lot of times, some of these conversations that would happen around the table, we'd have in Bali, I started this group called Mentorship Mondays. That's what I talk about in my TEDx talk. And every Monday we would come together for dinner and conversation and to practice being vulnerable with each other, build these deeper relationships and connections. And, we'd often have over 20 guys around a table. And I remember one meeting in particular, we had an 18-year-old on the one end, and on the other end, we had a 72-year-old. And we had everything in between. We also had 7 countries represented there. That's the nice thing about Bali. Everybody goes to Bali, so you get these people from all over the place, not just Balinese and Indonesians, but you have people from all different cultures, which is just a really cool thing to do as well, because there's different perspectives and experiences. But here's the thing. More often than not, I would see guys from other parts of the world, completely different areas and socioeconomic backgrounds, and that guy would share about a challenge he's working through. And I'd see 2 or 3 other guys put up their hand and say, hey, I struggle with that too. When you realize you're not alone, because all of a sudden it's like, man, this thing that I've been harboring and keeping in, thinking that no one will get me, no one will understand, no one will know how to help me because, gosh, I mean, who can relate to this problem? But as soon as you open up about it, you realize, man, there's a bunch of other people that are struggling with the exact same thing. And it's like, maybe we can help each other work through this stuff. Or you are actually 5 years further down the path of working through that stuff. What'd you do? I'd like to know that, because I want to follow that path too. And so this beautiful sort of connection and community was formed through this practice of developing vulnerability. And I think it's a valuable skill that any person, especially a man, can develop. And so, yeah, those are some of the things that I learned in this process of working through my own challenges, if you will, especially with alcohol and other things. But that's been the biggest takeaway I've had.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, Dai. For the audience, what is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who may be following through your footsteps right now?
If you're a man or a woman or non-binary, it doesn't matter, but find a community of like-minded people. I think just joining a community isn't enough. You have to find a community you feel like you belong to. There's a difference, right? When we look at the social media, Facebook is an example. I mean, gosh, you could be a member in a bajillion groups, right? But how many of those groups do you feel like you really belong to? And I think that's far fewer. It's not as easy to find that, but it's worth looking for. And if you can't find it, do what I've done in the past. I haven't found anything. I'm just going to make one. I'll put it out there to people that I know and say, this is what my idea is. This is what I want to do. This is my intention with it. Do you want to do it too? You'd be surprised. Like even with men's groups, just start one. Start one. Connect with some other men that you know. Say, listen, this is what I like to do. I like to start practicing, just being open, being honest, being more transparent, especially with other men. And if that's something to value that you're seeking, you just got to start doing it, and you'll see that everything changes. And so that's my invitation. Find a community, people that see the potential in you that maybe you can't see in yourself, because they will be the mirror. They will drip into you. They will support you as you get going, as you get on further down that path. And I know this will always happen because I've seen it happen every single time. As you further progress, you're going to turn around and look back on how far you've come, and you're going to see some other people standing where you were standing. And most of the time, I see those people go back to where they were and now bring them along as well. That is what sustains the change and truly develops a lot of that internal gratitude and appreciation for oneself, when we can then turn around and help others deal with the same challenges that we've worked through. That's been the most impactful piece for me in those last 13 years. It's the part that gets me most excited, makes me feel most connected to myself and everything around me, is that ability to help others now do it as well. There's tremendous value that we get in that. And it's very intrinsic. It is quite often very subjective as well. I'm not saying this would work for everybody, but it's something that I encourage people. And if you go look at studies, especially studies in the mental health and depression space, helping others is a wonderful way. It doesn't cost money, does involve some time, some energy, but it's a sure way to also rebuild or continue to build and develop that resiliency I was talking about before. And so those are what I would offer up as a piece of advice.
So join a community with other like-minded people, get help, be vulnerable, help each other, send the elevator back down basically. And there's no sense of purpose other than helping other people. And I love that. What is your favorite book? I know you mentioned Deep Work by Cal Newport. Any other books?
Yeah, there's a few. One of the books that I always recommend my clients to read when they start working with me is one called Big Leap, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. It's a fairly short read, but it talks all about limiting beliefs, the self-sabotaging nature that we all contend with in ourselves, this ability that when things are going really great, subconsciously, we often try to undermine that to make it not so great. That unconditioned bias or conditional bias that we all face. So it's a really good book just to give people sort of a look inward to what might be going on inside, especially on the mental side. So that's one book. There's a second one, which is a little bit different, but I think just as impactful, if not more impactful, and that's Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. I think it should be required reading in every high school, to be honest. I think anybody before they graduate high school should read that book. It's powerful. It's all about aligning purpose and meaning in life, and getting clarity of what's that path, and then following it. And don't worry, it's not a straight line or anything. You're going to deviate, you're going to change, but it just gives you a beautiful framework and what he calls logotherapy, which is this idea of getting clarity of meaning and purpose, or defining that meaning in our own lives to give us more sense of purpose. So we feel more motivated intrinsically to do the things that we do, to show up a certain way. And without getting into all the details of the book, the first half is all about his experience through World War II and the various concentration camps he found himself. Auschwitz was one of them. He lost all his family, all his friends. It's a remarkable story. It is graphic at times. It's hard, but the message is so, so powerful. And I encourage people to read that. And then one more just on the fiction side, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Great book. So those are three.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And our last question is, where can our audience get in touch with you? This has been a great conversation.
Thanks, Vijay. And I've loved it. And your questioning is just awesome. I've enjoyed this sort of reminiscing period, but also remembering what the lessons were for myself too. I just thank you for that. And I'm most active when we talk about social media. It's Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'm most active on those three platforms. So just shoot me a message and you can say, hey, this is my favorite book. I heard you and Vijay talking. This is what I love to read, or this is what I'm reading. That's a great way to start a conversation. Outside of that, if you're looking for more information to empower yourself for change in whatever fashion that is, my website's got about 1,700 articles on it. And I've been blogging. As I often joke, I'm an OG when it comes to blogging, not original gangster, but old guy. I love that. I've been blogging since 2006 and 2007. So you can imagine there's a lot of content there. all geared to helping people with change, whether it be fitness, nutrition, mindset. I mean, everything in between. There's a lot there. It's a bit of a rabbit hole. So good luck going through the looking glass, and enjoy the process. But don't hesitate to reach out anytime. I'm around and I'm accessible. And but Vijay, I just want to say thank you to you before we sign off here. What you do is often, you don't get a lot of thanks, I'm sure. You might get the occasional one, but I know there's people out there that are deeply impacted by these conversations that you're creating space to have. I just want to say thank you. We need more people contributing this type of content to the world, because this is what helps us all gain more clarity and confidence and take better actions when it comes to creating the results we want in our lives. And that's what you're doing, just by hosting this space, creating this platform. So I just want to say thank you.
Dai, thank you so much. That was very, very nice of you. I'm actually kind of tearing up right now. So thank you. That's so sweet.
No, it's amazing.
I appreciate it.
It honestly is. It's amazing, and we need more of this. We really do, it's sad to have to say that, that we need more of this. But you pick up any newspaper, any radio station, every TV, just the amount of negative news.
Yeah,
it's affecting we can talk about the zeitgeist and get into all that stuff, but listen, our culture as a human species, it's heavily being bombarded right now with negative messaging. We need more people like you to stand up and start contributing more positive, because we have to offset that scale. We really do. I look at my kids and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. I'm worried for them, and so that's what we just keep doing what we do, man. We'll just keep fighting the good fight.
Really, really appreciate you. I'll put all this in the show notes so everyone that's listening can get in touch with Dai. Dai, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Vijay. Absolute honor. And looking forward to having you on my show when it launches in about a month here. So I'll be reaching back to you to interview you too.
Perfect. Awesome.
Hey, it's Vijay. If you liked this video, you are going to love this video. Make sure you click it, leave questions in the comments, and I'm here to help however I can. Hope you have a great day.